Budget picks winners and creates losers, and for that reason, it's not supportable.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Halifax West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to rise in debate on this year's budget. It is, Mr. Speaker, another budget that fails, I'm afraid, to offer very much for Nova Scotians or for Atlantic Canadians in general, for my region, and it fails to offer very much to Canadians who might be concerned about the economy, you know, as we watch what's happening in the U.S., as we see the lowest consumer confidence levels in many years, as we see financial institutions not matching the lowering of the interest rate by the Federal Reserve Bank in the U.S., so that there is a tightening of credit, banks, financial institutions less willing to lend, and therefore consumers less able to get access to credit to buy homes, to buy cars, and we can expect, I think, less spending on a variety of things. We should be concerned about that in Canada because obviously the U.S. Is our biggest customer, so to speak. It is our biggest market by far, and the vast majority of our goods, our exports, are sold to the United States. So Canadians are concerned about that, but they see so little in this budget that deals with it, largely because of the situation that the actions in the past 2 years have left the government in. There's very little here. It fails to offer very much for Canadians who are concerned about the environment as well, and for so many other areas, like many other members have spoken of today. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the Halifax Herald describes the 2008 budget as being most remarkable for being least memorable. It's a rather unremarkable budget in that regard. It has very little good news for our region, and it's no wonder, given how much the government has squandered in the last two budgets. But at least this year's budget is a little better than the previous two, considering how bad they were. In 2006, the government destroyed the National Child Care Program because it didn't fit their right-wing ideology. We saw the same thing in relation to the Guide program, which they then tried to resurrect with a new name and a feeble imitation of it, Mr. Speaker. But we see over and over again where they don't like a program because it was started by the Liberal government. They may, in fact, somehow recognize there was validity to it, that it had benefits, because they then come back with something similar, some shadow of that program afterwards, like they did with Guide, Mr. Speaker, like they're doing now in relation to the Millennium Scholarship Program. But they're so ideologically driven that they can't seem to accept that if it was done by a Liberal government that it could be any good. And, Mr. Speaker, that is entirely unreasonable. But in the 2007 budget, of course, things got much worse for Nova Scotia. I mentioned the 2006 budget, which was bad. The 2007 budget was considerably worse because in that budget, of course, as Nova Scotians know, the Prime Minister betrayed Nova Scotians, and he refused to honor his word to live up to the Atlantic Accord, to fulfill the Atlantic Accord, and he killed it, Mr. Speaker, as members well know. But let's look at this year's budget, which I can only call lackluster. And again, we see in it the anti-Atlantic bias of the government. Nova Scotia Finance Minister Michael Baker, who is a progressive conservative, told reporters last week that he was in fact relieved that the federal budget doesn't appear to hurt the province the way that last year's budget did. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, supposedly a fellow conservative, although in this case, as many progressive conservatives in Nova Scotia point out, they are progressive conservatives, not the same party as this government across the way. And as we've heard from Premier Danny Williams in Newfoundland, he makes the same point very clearly when he talks about the kinds of negative things this government has done for our country, for our social programs, etc. So Mr. Baker was in fact relieved that this budget didn't hurt the province as much as last year's did. However, he did note that it isn't much help either, that this budget's not doing very much to assist Nova Scotia, and he's concerned about that. He's concerned that because of the situation the government has left itself in, it isn't doing very much to get the economy going in a time when we are likely to have possible slowdown. In fact, many commentators have pointed out, including the Halifax Herald, Steve Maher. I don't mean to say even, by the way. He pointed out, among others, that the Regional Development Agency, ACOA, was not even mentioned in the budget. Imagine Not even mentioned. And I guess that's what happens. I suppose that's what you get when you have a part-time minister for ACOA. You know, the Prime Minister didn't think that ACOA was important enough to have one minister whose attention is focused on that job. That says a lot about this Prime Minister and this government, Mr. Speaker, I'm sad to say. But the news gets worse for ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, because there are also reports, Mr. Speaker, that ACOA will get less funding. The reports are based on the government's own spending estimates. The main estimates for 2008-2009 show that ACOA's budget will be down 25% compared to the last Liberal budget. Now, conservative spin doctors are already trying to explain away these cuts and to shift the blame away from themselves. You know, Mr. Speaker, if this government would invest as much in regional development as it does in its spin doctors and spin control, the region would be a lot better off in polling, as my honourable colleague from Malpeque says. Many people in Halifax West and other Nova Scotia ridings tell me that they have a deep fear that things are going to get a lot worse because of the ideological bent of this government. That's one of the reasons they are certainly determined that they not get the majority, Mr. Speaker. We hear that a lot. Many Nova Scotians are upset when they read headlines about the Conservatives betraying war widows, for example. Or when they read editorials which describe this as a pothole budget. And of course, they're referring to the Finance Minister's raid on current and future surpluses to cut the GST. And, you know, they're appalled when they read about this pork barrel express that he's planned, this railroad announcement that got thrown in, apparently at the last moment. His own department couldn't even explain it or give details of it. But it benefits his riding, Mr. Speaker. I mean, that's disappointing. And last year we had a similar similar situation where there was a company next door to his riding that benefited from a particular measure in the budget, I understand. So it's disturbing to see that kind of thing 2 years in a row. And it seems to be part of a pattern. In fact, I believe that media reports this morning it was interesting, they noted that after three conservative budgets, the government of Canada has effectively been made much less capable of offering new social programs or meaningful tax cuts for the foreseeable future. And who was saying that? The Prime Minister's pal and mentor, Tom Flanagan, right? His own conservative right-wing guru is admitting this. It's remarkable. Now, the Finance Minister is already trying to cover himself for the reckless, drunken sailor kinds of spending that they've had over the past few years, and he's already warning Canadians to be prepared for a slowing economy in the next 2 years and for rising unemployment. It reminds me of Kim Campbell in the 93 election, who was talking about there'll be no new jobs until 2000. For 7 years, there'll be no new jobs. And he's already trying to say, it's not really our fault, but the economy is going to get bad. The fact that we've already reduced our ability to deal with that, well, that's too bad, right? Well, Mr. Speaker, it's too bad that he didn't consider the possibility of a slowdown, of economic problems in this country, of the effect of the rising dollar on a manufacturing sector, particularly the automobile sector, when he made these decisions to squander the tremendous surpluses that he inherited. I mean, this government was left in the best situation of any government coming into office in this country's history. A $13 billion surplus that they registered after only a month and a half in office at the end of March of 2006. And here they are 2 years later on the knife's edge in relation to a possible deficit. I mean, clearly, if in fact there is a real slowdown in this country, Mr. Speaker, we clearly could be in a situation where we have a deficit again, and something that the Canadians certainly do not want. You know, perhaps they don't understand what it was like in the mid-90s, what the process was like, and the sacrifices that Canadians made, the tough decisions that the Liberal government of the day made to get our finances back in order, to strengthen our situation fiscally so that then our economy could get going and produce the kinds of jobs that it did produce, 2 million in fact by the year 2000, contrary completely to what Kim Campbell was talking about, Mr. Speaker. And I see you're giving me the indication that my time is up. I look forward to having more discussion and questions and comments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments.